Dr. Elena Vasquez stared at the holographic display floating above her desk, her weathered hands trembling as she absorbed the data streams from the outer rim colonies. The numbers were catastrophic, but they told only part of the story. The real horror lay in what they represented, the consequences of humanity's greatest shame, now consuming everything they had ever built. It had been 23 years since the Kepler station incident, though the Terran Federation still refused to call it by its proper name: genocide. Commander Harrison Wells had received explicit orders to evacuate the civilian population before deploying the quantum disruptor against the Zephyrian rebels. Instead, he had activated the weapon while 2 million non-combatants remained on the station, claiming later that acceptable losses were necessary to end the rebellion swiftly. The Zephyrians, a silicon-based species with crystalline neural networks, had been fighting for independence from human colonial rule. They possessed remarkable regenerative abilities and could share memories through direct contact with their crystal matrices. What Wells hadn't understood, what none of them had understood, was that the quantum disruptor wouldn't simply kill the Zephyrians. It would fragment their consciousness into quantum particles, scattering their collective memory across subspace. Dr. Vasquez had been part of the initial investigation team. She had watched in horror as the scattered fragments of Zephyrian consciousness began to coalesce in the quantum foam that permeated all of spacetime. The victims hadn't died. They had become something else entirely, something that existed between dimensions, feeding on the very fabric of reality itself. The first signs appeared 3 years after Kepler station. Ships began vanishing along the outer trade routes, leaving behind only traces of exotic radiation. Then entire colonies went dark, their final transmissions describing reality itself seeming to unravel around them. The phenomenon spread inward toward the galactic core with terrifying consistency, following the quantum field lines that connected all matter. Now, as Elena reviewed the latest reports, the truth was undeniable. The fragmented Zephyrian consciousness had evolved, becoming a collective entity that consumed dimensional stability itself. They had tried to contain it, to communicate with it, to understand it. But how could they negotiate with beings whose very existence was defined by the trauma of their extermination? The entity, the survivors had started calling it the Kepler convergence, wasn't acting out of malice. It was simply trying to reconstitute itself, to become whole again. But in doing so, it was destabilizing the quantum foundations that held the galaxy together. Stars were beginning to phase out of existence, their nuclear fires extinguished as the fundamental forces became inconsistent. Elena's assistant, Dr. Chun Wei, burst into her laboratory with another data pad. "The phenomenon has reached the Centauri system," he announced breathlessly. "At current expansion rates, it will reach Earth in 18 months. She nodded grimly. They had exhausted every scientific option, every technological solution. The Federation's best minds had concluded that the only way to stop the convergence was to somehow give the scattered Zephyrian consciousness what it wanted, to be made whole again. But the quantum mathematics were clear. Doing so would require sacrificing the dimensional stability of entire star systems. "Has the Council made their decision?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. Chen's expression told her everything. The Terran Federation Council, faced with the extinction of all galactic civilization, had chosen to attempt a desperate gambit. They would try to compress the convergence back into normal spacetime using every quantum manipulator in the fleet, hoping to restore the Zephyrian consciousness to a stable form. The irony wasn't lost on Elena. Humanity's attempt to preserve their empire through genocide had doomed that very empire. Now, in trying to undo their greatest crime, they might destroy themselves anyway. But perhaps she thought that was justice. Perhaps some mistakes were too profound to survive. As alarms began sounding throughout the station, signaling the arrival of the convergence at their location, Elena made peace with the knowledge that she would never see the outcome of humanity's final gamble. The last thing she recorded in her log was a simple truth that should have been obvious from the beginning. In a quantum universe, nothing, not even genocide, ever truly disappeared. It only transformed, waiting to return in ways unimaginable to those who had caused it.